More money means more freedom. At least that's the assumption that many people carry with them into their retirement years. And in some ways, it's true. But here's what catches people off guard. The bigger portfolio doesn't necessarily mean the bigger life. Sometimes it just creates a bigger number that you're afraid to touch. So today we're going to talk about having $1 million, $2 million, even $5 million in retirement. But we're not going to do it like a scoreboard where people with $5 million automatically win. Because here's the rub. I've been doing this for nearly 2 decades, and I've sat across the table from people who had well over $5 million on their balance sheet. And I'm here to tell you that sometimes those people are the most stressed and anxious when it comes to their financial future. And I've watched people who have far less than 5 million, who've paid off their debts, they have consistent cash flow, they've created a plan for themselves, and their lives are completely full and they feel financially free. So what are we really talking about? Well, after thousands of conversations when it comes to retirement and retirement income planning, let me tell you what the real risk is. No, it's not running out of money, although that is a very big one, and that's one we need to think about. But the real risk is getting to the end of your life and having this giant pile of money left over that you never gave yourself permission to enjoy. You never did the things you dreamed about doing because you were so concerned about making your money last that you forgot to actually live those years in retirement. And unfortunately, those years we can never get back. That's the real risk, which means the number on your balance sheet or the numbers on your statement isn't really the answer. The answer is, what are those numbers supposed to do for you in retirement? Let's get into it. I would argue that many people compare retirement numbers like they do scoreboards. 1 million is great. That means 2 million must be even better. And 5 million, my goodness, you've completely won the game. And in many instances, that could be true. But I would want you to think about retirement a different way. Think about the way that retirement is often marketed. I remember years ago, there was a magical campaign that talked about finding your magic number. And if you just achieved this number, that all of your dreams would come true. Well, that's a myth. That's smoke and mirrors. That is marketing. Retirement is much more real than that. And we want to talk about what actually matters for people who are planning for retirement. You see, you could have $1 million saved in your retirement accounts, paid off your home, you live within your means, you have consistent cash flow, and you could be much more content than someone who's got several times that on their balance sheet. Does your overall portfolio balance matter? Sure, of course it does. We're not here to suggest that it doesn't, but I just think it's more than that. So the real question you should ask yourself is not how much money do I have? It's what does that money need to do for me? What's its job? This is an area that clicked for me years ago when I decided to work specifically in and focus on retirement and retirement income planning. One of the things that I learned very early on through hundreds and hundreds of conversations with people when it comes to their retirement. Yes, they were concerned about markets. Yes, they were concerned about outliving their money, which made me start to realize that one of the most important things that anyone can do, at least in my opinion, is to build their retirement around reliable income sources. Reliable income, that's the money that you can rely on showing up consistently over and over and over again. So think about things like your Social Security check. One of the things that makes Social Security so valuable as part of the retirement planning process today is it acts as though it is a pension from the government where you've paid into this system and you are going to easily be able to calculate how much your Social Security check will be whenever you turn on your benefits. Not only that, you have a check that could be for you. Your spouse could claim benefits based on your worker benefit if they didn't work enough to qualify, or their benefit might be lower from having an extended time away from work. And those benefits get inflation adjustments. It's a tremendous asset when it comes to retirement planning, which is why you should get Social Security claiming right. But you also have to think about people who may have pension benefits or some other income sources like annuity income, where they can add to their Social Security checks to continue to increase what we call their floor of income in retirement. Predictable cash flow that you don't have to think about is tremendous for retirement planning. And here's why that matters. Predictable, reliable income gives us a license to spend in retirement. In fact, David Blanchett and Michael Finca did a research report on this, talking about the license to spend. In fact, that may even be the name of the report or the research they did, license to spend. But it talks about the cash flows that people receive in retirement, those predictable cash flows, helping you feel empowered to spend your money instead of not spending it and trying to save it. You see, we are wired, if you will, to spend income. And we don't like it, at least cognitively or psychologically, we don't like the idea of spending down our savings. So think about how this worked while you were working, right? You go to work, you put some money aside in your savings, you build your cash fund. Hopefully you're building an emergency fund. You're putting money aside in your retirement plan. And then your paycheck is what you do life on. Your paycheck is where you're trying to live within those means, while you can also hopefully meet those savings goals. Well, your paycheck, that consistency allows you to plan and kind of do life on a consistent basis, right? If that paycheck were to vary each and every month, it would be really hard to live in any kind of consistent manner. That's what we're talking about with retirement. When you have those reliable income streams, it creates a license to spend. Most people don't have any problem spending their Social Security check because it's reliable, predictable, and we know that, hey, it's going to come again the next month. The same with pensions. Many of the most happy retirees we will ever meet are those with pension incomes because those checks continue to come on a reliable basis. This is in direct contrast to those people who are going to rely on their portfolio of assets to generate their paychecks in retirement, especially those who are looking at some type of systematic withdrawal strategy. Those strategies can absolutely work. There are many different ways that you can construct a strategy that works over the course of retirement. But I think investor experience matters. I think psychology matters. I think behavior matters. Our emotions matter. We cannot help but get in our own way sometimes, which is why, even though you might look at your balance sheet and we factor in the things that we can control, we run our projections, we run our simulations, but it still feels difficult. It feels like we're not going to make it or not going to be successful, even if the math is telling a different story. This is one of the reasons why I wholeheartedly believe in creating an income floor for yourself in retirement. So to define that, an income floor is an income level that you do not expect to ever fall beneath during your retirement years. So if you think about, if you have Social Security checks, if you have pension, or you create a pension using some type of annuity strategy, what you're doing, you are creating an income floor for yourself that no matter what, those paychecks are going to be reliable and consistent throughout your retirement. I've said in other videos, but if you were to look at retirement research, a lot of people use the floor for your essential living needs, right? Your essentials, housing, utilities, bills, food, groceries, those types of things, essentials. But what I've learned in working with retirees is many retirees, the lifestyle that they have right now, they tend to view that as essential. Most people that I've ever spoken with have no desire to ever go back or to reduce their standard of living in retirement. They want to, at the minimum, maintain and possibly do some extras. So I would encourage you, if you're looking at planning or creating a floor, you don't go to the essential bare bones, no fun budget as a floor. You look at your actual lifestyle that you want to protect and work to create a flooring strategy around that. Okay, quick note before we keep going. If you're liking what I'm saying here and this makes sense and resonates with you, but you're like, wait a minute, I don't really even have an idea about how to do flooring or what this may look like or where I should even begin. That's why my team has a retirement fit call strategy or a free consultation. Click on the link in the description of this video and schedule a time with us. At the beginning of the video, I talked about 3 different scenarios: 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. So let's dive into each of those and talk about how flooring may impact that strategy or may not be necessary in that strategy. So if you've saved $1 million, congratulations. That is a tremendous accomplishment. Now we need to have to start thinking about what those $1 million actually need to do for us in retirement. Let's imagine your paycheck has stopped. Where do your next paychecks come from? Will it be Social Security? Will it be pension? Will it be the portfolio? One of the challenges that many people can face in retirement is their portfolio now has multiple jobs. Whereas when they were working and saving, the portfolio really needed to do one thing, and that was hopefully just grow and not go backwards. Well, now we have to think about growing the wealth, preserving the wealth, taxes, inflation, ad hoc withdrawals, spending shocks, anything we might need extra for healthcare that Medicare isn't going to cover. That portfolio now has multiple jobs, and it still has to fund the life that you want. That's a lot to ask from one portfolio. So at 1 million, the question for many of these households needs to be, can my portfolio reliably create the paychecks that I need it to so that I can maintain my standard of living during my retirement years? Or how does my portfolio work together with my other reliable income streams so that my money can last throughout retirement? At $2 million, the conversation, of course, is naturally going to change. This becomes less about plan structure and fine tuning and more about flexibility. But I want to be careful here because $2 million doesn't mean you just spend freely without any thinking. At a $2 million portfolio level, working with the assumption that many folks save the majority of their assets in qualified retirement plans, taxes now become a much bigger part of the discussion. Healthcare still matters. Healthcare expenses are still going to be there. And of course, market risk and market forces are still going to be present. But the reality is you have more resources available to help you solve some of those problems. So you're going to want to have an income plan that's built around flexibility and how you want to actually maneuver through retirement. But we have to also start thinking about taxes and making sure that we don't spend way more money paying taxes than we would otherwise if we had a structured withdrawal strategy. One of the things that more money can often do is buy you flexibility and options. But many times it doesn't necessarily buy you clarity, because the more resources we have, the more complexity tends to enter into the conversation, right? And one of the things that you'll learn, especially as you grow your wealth, is that our financial priorities are not sequential. They all come at us at the same time. There's not something where we're only going to deal with one thing at a time, because that's not how life works. Turns out I've seen plenty of people with $1.5, $2 million, $2 million plus who still feel a bit overwhelmed at what they should be doing. They know that they've done a good job saving, but they still feel a little bit trapped and they don't necessarily have clarity on what they should be doing next. So the real question for people who have been doing a great job saving and they've got over $2 million is, how do you turn all of that flexibility into an actual strategy? And how do you really begin to prioritize what's most important to you? This idea of alignment. Because most likely, if you've done enough to be able to save at this level, you're pretty good at saving. And you're most likely really good at living within your means. So you've got flexibility. But how do we create a plan out of that, a strategy out of that flexibility, and create clarity for the path ahead? That's the question you need to be asking yourself. So if you're still with me, let's talk about the people who've just won the game. People who have saved and accumulated in excess of $5 million. Now, first, before you tune out, if you're thinking, well, I don't have $5 million, this doesn't apply to me, stick with me. Because one of the things that we see all the time is people who want to know what the wealthy people do. And we're going to talk about what the wealthy people have done and maybe should do. So even if this doesn't apply to you, there could be some principles that you could take away that you can apply to your own life. This is where I would encourage people to start really thinking about financial finish lines. And what I mean by that is, most likely unless you just really spend a lot of money, and that $5 million really has to support a high level of spending where the traditional retirement metrics need to be applied. Most likely we're looking at people who are going to have long-term legacy goals at this level of wealth. So we need to start thinking about all the same things. One, what does our money need to do for us? What type of reliable income do we have? What's the job of the portfolio? Then two, we need to start thinking about also the flexibility. How do we take the flexibility that we have, the freedom, the financial freedom that we have, and craft that into a coherent strategy for the road ahead? And then three, what are my long-term legacy goals for this money? What do I ultimately want this money to do for me and my family? If you look at our company website, we have three things that we talk about: vision, alignment, and stewardship. And this is the area where all three of these really apply. We have to think about our long-term vision. Are we aligned? Does our money and what we're doing with our money really align with our personal and core values? And then how are we stewarding that wealth for not just today, but for the future and possibly future wealth creation? As we said earlier, having more resources and more flexibility often does create more complexity. And our financial priorities are not sequential. They come at us all at the same time. So this is where having a careful thought partner and a planning strategy that can help us align with what's most important to us and start living out and executing that plan over the long term. It really becomes valuable for people with higher balance sheets. So at this level, at 5 million, the question isn't, will I have enough or will my money last? The answer to that is most likely a resounding yes. The question is more about, am I using this money and am I living with purpose? Am I stewarding my wealth with intention and with alignment to what's most important to me and my family? And here's a big one. Am I preparing the next steward? Whomever or whoever is going to receive this money after me, am I preparing them so that this wealth can actually be a blessing to them and not a curse, or that they don't squander it? These are the realities of people who have a much higher balance sheet. So just to give you a quick recap, for people who are at the $1 million or below level, most of these folks, we need to really dial in that income plan and be focused in on that income floor. What do we need our portfolio to do for us in retirement so that we can live the retirement that we've thought about and dreamed about, and we feel free to spend our resources? At the $2 million plus level, we still need to have a plan, but we have a lot more flexibility. And it's like, how do we use that flexibility to create a strategy? And how do we get smart about taxes, about how we do our withdrawals? How do we plan for the future and the road ahead? Do we have legacy goals? And at the $5 million plus balance sheet, then the questions were going to change, because most likely we're not asking ourselves, will I have enough? It's more likely, am I living with intention? What does my portfolio need to do? Of course. Is my strategy in alignment with my goals? And then what's my vision for the next generation? Do I have a plan for my legacy and to preserve and protect this wealth for my family and future generations? Are those next stewards prepared? These are great questions, but the hardest part of this is actually understanding where you really are at on this journey. One of my friends, Brian Portnoy, one of my favorite phrases that he uses is, true wealth is funded contentment. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. What does contentment look like for me? That lifestyle that I want in the future, that lifestyle that I want to protect for myself and my loved ones, what does it cost? What's the price tag for that? So how much is enough to be able to fund that lifestyle? And then how do we create a strategy so that we can feel comfortable spending the resources that we've been able to save? Because you've spent decades training yourself on how to save, but very few people know how to spend well. That may sound weird, right? We don't know how to spend. Of course we know. We all know how to spend money. But the reality is most of us have trained ourselves to spend money on the income that we've created from employment, not from retirement. So retirement for a lot of us needs to be thinking about, how do we recreate those paychecks so we do have that license to spend and we can create that floor or that lifestyle floor that we want so that we can spend that money and enjoy life on our terms. Then we move into the next phase of how do we, if we have flexibility, how do we craft that flexibility into a cohesive strategy? And then for those of us who have really done a great job and they've been extraordinarily blessed with their resources, what does the next chapter look like? What does the future look like? How do I leverage the wealth today for impact, generosity, future wealth, future generational wealth for the family? Are those people prepared to receive that type of wealth? Are we being smart with taxes? Are we being smart with estate planning? So understand that more money means more complexity. And with that complexity, what we want is clarity and confidence for the road ahead. And that's why I think that real retirement planning isn't just about your investments or your portfolio. Yes, those are important, but we want to also think about all the other pieces. We need to think about our behavior, who we really are, like our values, what's important to us. Who are we responsible for? What are our responsibilities? What's our vision? What are our values? Are we living in a way that we are aligned with, our money is aligned with what we say is important to us? All of this stuff requires clarity to have a cohesive strategy for the long run. So here's the question I would leave you with. That retirement that you've been dreaming about, or that financial future that you've been dreaming about, what are the finish lines? How much does it cost? How much is enough for you to be able to live the lifestyle that you want for the road ahead? Now, if you're still with me, thank you for sticking through this video. I know it was a lot to understand, but hopefully something in here resonated with you. And if you're on this journey and you're trying to figure out where you fall as far as preparedness, or if you were just lost and you need some help and you want to have a conversation, click the link in our description. We would love to have a fit call with you and just give you a free consultation to understand a little bit more about what's going on with you. No pressure from us, just a conversation. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next time.